It begins at night. Moonlight spills across the dunes like pale water, flowing gently over curves shaped by centuries of wind. The desert is quiet, so quiet that even time seems to pause, listening. Beneath the silver glow, faint shadows appear and disappear, not cast by anything that lives above the surface. They belong to something older, something buried, something that once knew the sky by heart. It is said that places remember, that stone holds memory the way lungs hold breath. And here, beneath layers of sand and silence, there are streets that still remember the moon. The question drifts softly into the dark. Can a road remember the sky it was built under? Long before the desert claimed this land, there was a city that lived by night as much as by day. Its people did not fear darkness, they welcomed it. When the sun fell away, the city did not close, it opened. Lamps were few, moonlight was enough. The streets themselves were shaped to receive it. These roads were not carved for speed or conquest. They were worn smooth by unhurried footsteps, by generations who walked slowly, speaking quietly, listening often. Each path curved with intention. Each crossing carried meaning. From above, if anyone had ever looked, the city would have appeared like a silent instrument, tuned to the rhythm of the heavens. Whispers tell us the streets mirrored the lunar cycle. Crescent paths for beginnings, full arcs for gathering, long straight roads aligned with the rising moon at certain times of year. Nothing was random, nothing was rushed. Beneath the silence, stone still holds the pattern. Even now, buried deep, the streets lie exactly as they were left. Sand has filled their grooves, but it has not broken them. The desert does not destroy what it respects. It covers, it keeps, it remembers. Some believe the city's builders watched the sky more closely than their neighbors. They understood that time was not a line, but a tide, that nights mattered as much as days, that rest was not absence, but presence in another form. At the heart of the city were calendars etched not on walls, but into the streets themselves. Pale stone tiles marked with crescents and circles, stars and spirals. As moonlight moved across them, the city knew where it stood in time, not by command, but by observation. The sky spoke, the city listened. Scholars, centuries later, would find fragments of these stones and dismiss them as decoration, coincidence, ornamentation without function. But stone does not lie, it waits. The streets remain patient, unarguing. Imagine walking there long ago, the air cool, the moon rising slowly between columns. Your feet follow a path worn smooth by ancestors you never met, yet somehow know. The road guides you without signs, without words. It reflects just enough light to show the way home. This was a city that honored night. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places where darkness is not feared, only misunderstood. This was one of them. Children learned the stars before they learned numbers. Elders spoke in pauses, not proclamations. Silence was not empty, it was full. As the moon moved, so did life. Markets opened and closed in rhythm with the sky. Ceremonies began not at fixed hours, but at certain shadows. The city did not chase time. It waited for it. And then, one night, the rhythm stopped. No one knows why. Some say the moon failed them, that clouds covered the sky for too many nights in a row. Others believe the city chose to step away, sealing itself from a world growing louder, faster, less patient. There are no signs of panic, no broken streets, no hurried repairs. The roads end gently, as if their travelers simply paused and never returned. The disappearance of the city was not an ending. It was a quiet withdrawal, a breath held. As sand began to gather, moonlight still found its way down for a while. It traced the old paths, remembered the old alignments. But slowly, even the light faded. The streets slipped into darkness. Not the darkness of fear, but of rest. Emotion settles here into something like longing. Not grief, not loss. Something softer. A recognition that the world once moved differently. That nights were once honored, not conquered. That time itself once felt like a companion, not an enemy. Where memory fades, rhythm fades with it. And yet, beneath the dunes, the streets remember. They remember the moon's weightless touch. They remember the sound of sandals against stone. They remember pauses between words. They remember when darkness was a teacher. Now, above them, clouds pass slowly across the sky. Moonlight dims, then disappears entirely. The desert becomes a single breathing shadow. Below, the streets wait. They do not call out. They do not demand discovery. They hold their alignment, their patience, their silence. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps some paths exist only to be remembered in dreams. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And when the clouds pass and the moon returns, somewhere beneath the sand, the streets will remember it again. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And the city beneath the dunes still breathes. Not loudly, not urgently, only enough to be felt in the stillness before sleep. Close your eyes. Let the wind guide you there. It begins with wind, a quiet sigh, moving across a sea of sand that stretches beyond memory. The dunes shift softly, endlessly, reshaping themselves as if exhaling ancient dreams. Pale golden light lingers just above the horizon, neither night nor day, only the hush between. It is said the desert forgets nothing, and yet, beneath this undisturbed ocean of dust, something waits. Not long ago, and not recently either, there was breath here, breath in stone, breath in shadow, a city, hidden now, swallowed not by war or ruin, but by time's gentlest hand. Beneath the shifting sands lies a silence that once spoke. Some call it Irem, the city of pillars. Others do not name it at all, as though even breath may awaken what was meant to sleep. Only fragments remain, a line on a broken scroll, a sigil carved into the base of a shattered statue, a path on a map that leads into emptiness. Caravans whisper of it when the sky turns copper and the sun leans low. They speak not with certainty, but with reverence, and their stories wander like the dunes, never the same shape twice. Beneath the sand lies breath, footsteps, prayers, the quiet murmur of a fountain long stilled. And it is here, in the warm hush of nightfall, that we begin to descend, not with haste, but with a drifting heart, as if sinking, grain by grain, into memory. It is said the city aligned itself with the sky, temples arranged in sacred rhythm, one for the dawn, one for the equinox, one that caught the breath of stars on the longest night. No wall was raised without meaning, no gate opened without the blessing of the wind. The people moved with purpose and patience. Time was not kept by numbers, by shadow and birdsong, by the hush of moonlight on polished stone. They were courtyards wide enough to hold the sky. Pools that once mirrored the heavens now rest dry, their tiles hidden beneath centuries of dust. The city did not battle the desert. It danced with it. Walls were curved to greet the wind, arches welcomed its cooling touch. The desert, in return, spared the city. For a while. Even now, under the deep sand, the architecture remains. Some believe untouched, preserved in a sacred stillness. No conquest disturbed it. No fire consumed it. When the city disappeared, it did so like a breath drawn in and never released. There are stories of a drought. Others speak of an eclipse that lingered too long. But one tale, the oldest, spoken only in night, tells of a quiet choice, that the city sealed itself willingly, that at dawn, under a sky washed in rose and ash, its people closed the gates for the last time and did not look back. The gates, yes, they were unlike any other. Tall and narrow, crowned with spirals carved from stone, spirals that echoed the wind's own shape, turning inward, drawing in. Travelers once approached those gates and stood in stillness before passing through, as if the very air asked them to pause, to remember, to breathe. Now the gates lie beneath sand, their threshold broken by weight and silence. No hands remain to open them, no ritual to invoke passage. And yet some say if you stand in just the right place at dusk, when the wind dies down and the sky goes pale, you can feel it. A change in pressure, a soft exhalation from below, as if the city beneath still breathes. Not with lungs of flesh, but with chambers of sound. Vaulted halls and hollow corridors filled with the memory of breath. Within those halls once lived sacred things. Altars of black basalt warmed by torchlight. Murals painted with crushed lapis and gold, telling stories no mouth dared recite aloud. A library, perhaps, not one of books, but of echoes. Chambers built to hold sound, not paper. Each room tuned to a specific word, a chant, a silence. Scholars would enter, speak a single phrase, and listen to the resonance. The response was not knowledge, it was understanding. Some believed that was why the city chose to sleep, that the knowledge it held was not meant for those who rushed, who conquered, who shouted into the night. Wisdom, they said, is like water in a still bowl. Disturb it, and it disappears. So the city withdrew, not out of fear, but out of faith. Faith that time would fold itself gently over them like a linen shroud, and that one day, when the world was ready, the silence would open again. But the world forgot. Maps were drawn and redrawn, leaving its coordinates blank. Kingdoms rose and fell without its name. The stars it once honored shifted slightly in their course, and no one noticed. Still, the desert remembered. It kept the breath of the city beneath its warm skin, and whispered lullabies of sand through the hollows of its ruins. Once a traveler claimed to find a shard of painted wall far in the dunes, marked with spirals and a symbol for listening. He did not keep it. He placed it back in the sand and walked on, saying only, "It was not mine to disturb." Perhaps that is the way of such places. They do not reveal themselves to be claimed. They offer a glimpse, a breath, then vanish again.
It is said that the doorway still breathes. Half buried now, its threshold rests beneath a slow tide of sand, as though the desert itself paused mid-gesture. The lintel above is carved with symbols worn smooth by centuries of wind and touch. Spirals that once turned inward, crescents that once caught the moon, marks left by hands that believed stone could listen. The doorway does not invite. It waits. Beneath the silence, the question rises gently, like incense in still air. Why would a temple be closed while faith still lived? In forgotten corners of the earth, temples are built to endure noise, chants, crowds, ceremony. But this one was different. This was not a house of spectacle. It was a chamber of listening, a place where light moved with intention, where shadows were not absence, but guidance. The temple stood at the heart of the city, not by height or grandeur, but by quiet gravity. Streets curved toward it without urgency. Courtyards opened into its presence as if exhaling. And when one crossed its threshold, the world softened. Inside, the air was cool and measured. Light entered through narrow apertures shaped like stars and moons, falling only at certain hours, touching altars briefly, then withdrawing. Rituals here were shaped by breath, not proclamation, by the sound of footsteps slowing, by the pause before a word was spoken. Some believe the temple housed a presence, not a god with a name or a face, but a silence that answered questions without words. Those who entered did not ask aloud. They stood. They listened. And often they left lighter, though they could not say why. Beneath the silence, the walls remember. Stone chambers curved inward, echoing softly, as if designed to hold more than sound. The architecture did not amplify voices. It absorbed them. Every angle, every curve seemed to draw attention away from the speaker and toward something deeper, something inward. Marked by the moon, the temple followed a rhythm older than calendars. At certain nights, moonlight would trace a path along the floor, stopping precisely at the central altar. No hand guided it. No mechanism forced it. The sky itself completed the ritual. And then, one season, the light did not return. Not because the moon failed, but because the doors were closed. There are no signs of destruction, no scorch marks, no fallen columns. The stones remain intact, fitted together with care, as though sealed in a single deliberate breath. The closure was not an act of fear. It was an act of devotion. Whispers tell us the priests sensed a change beyond the walls, that the world outside the temple had grown louder, faster, more eager to fill silence with certainty. The sacred, they believed, could not survive such noise. So they chose preservation over proclamation. The final ritual was simple. No procession, no chant. The doors were drawn inward. Stone met stone. The light faded, and the temple closed its eyes. Emotion moves inward here, as the story does. The listener is invited to imagine standing before those closed doors, not feeling rejected, but relieved, as if the burden of understanding has been set down gently, as if some mysteries are kinder when left untouched. Where memory fades, the temple sleeps. Above it, seasons passed. Sand gathered. The city changed, then disappeared. But the temple remained, sealed and patient, holding its silence intact.
Some believe the presence within still listens, that it does not answer because it does not need to, that its purpose was never to explain, but to hold space for what cannot be said. Inside, dust settles slowly. Light does not intrude. Sound does not enter. The chambers rest as they were left, complete. Perhaps it was never meant to be opened again. Perhaps the closing was the final teaching. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so the temple remains beneath the sand. Eyes closed, breath steady, silence unbroken. Nothing escapes. Nothing enters. And the quiet feels whole. Let the thought rest there. Let the door remain closed. Sleep comes more easily when not everything must be known.
It begins with a sound that is almost not a sound at all. Not the rush of a river, nor the clear laughter of a spring, but a hush, a memory. The suggestion of water moving somewhere far below, where light does not travel and the world above cannot interrupt. In the desert, silence is never empty. It holds what was lost. It holds what was hidden. And sometimes, if the wind is gentle and the night is kind, it holds the faintest echo of a city's thirst being answered. It is said that beneath the dunes, water still sleeps in stone. At first, you see only sand, a pale ocean quietly turning beneath a moon that watches without judgment. The dunes rise and fall like breathing, slow, patient, ancient. And yet, beneath this smooth surface, there are shapes that do not belong to nature's wandering hand. A ring of stone, barely visible. A line that curves too deliberately. A depression that feels like a path, though no one walks it now. Beneath the silence, something waits. The old stories begin with a well. Not a well of rough digging and simple rope, but a mouth carved with devotion. A circle of sandstone fitted with care, etched with spirals and crescents worn smooth by centuries of touch. Travelers once found it by following cool air at dusk. They said the ground here breathed differently, like a sleeping animal, like a sealed chamber remembering rain. Some believe the city was built because of that breath. In forgotten corners of the earth, cities rise where water allows them. But this city, buried now, unnamed by most, did not merely settle near water, it listened for it. It shaped itself around what could not be seen. The people did not speak of water as a thing to seize, they spoke of it as a presence, a guest, a promise that could withdraw if disrespected. Whispers tell us that the city's first builders walked the dunes at night, when the heat loosened its hold and the stars felt closer. They carried no banners, no horns, no hurry, only small bowls of stone, held out as if to catch the breath of the ground. Where the air cooled the bowls, where the sand felt slightly damp to the fingertips, they marked the place, and there they began to carve. They carved channels in the earth like gentle veins. They carved cisterns like hidden chambers, curved and quiet. They carved wells that descended into darkness, each one a throat that led to a deeper world. Above ground, the city shimmered in day and softened at night. Streets curved between courtyards, temples faced the sky. But below, beneath the stone lungs and sand, there was a second city made of shadow and patience, a city of water. It is said the underground chambers were not merely functional, they were sacred. The walls were smoothed as lovingly as altars. In the largest cistern, the ceiling rose into a dome, pierced by a single narrow vent. At certain times, marked by the moon and the turning of stars, a beam of light would descend, not to illuminate, but to bless. Dust would drift through that beam like slow snowfall, and the water, far below, would hold the light on its surface for a moment, then let it go. Rituals were shaped by small gestures, a clay vessel lowered by rope, a whisper spoken into a shaft, not as command, but as greeting, a handful of salt offered into a basin, the way one might offer a word of thanks. The people understood something we have forgotten, that water remembers. They believed it carried the taste of every stone it touched, the echo of every chamber it passed through, the mood of the earth itself. To drink was to accept a story into your body, a story written in mineral and time. So they drank slowly. They did not waste. They waited. And the city endured, not because it conquered the desert, but because it moved with it. When rain came, rare and sudden, the channels guided it carefully into waiting reservoirs. When the air cooled at night, stone surfaces collected dew.
Even the wind was welcomed. It passed through narrow corridors and cooled storage rooms, protecting the precious water like a quiet guardian. The desert, for a long while, allowed this. But nothing in the world remains unchanged, not even silence. A drought may have come, or a shifting of underground currents, or the slow thickening of sand as the climate turned harsher. The records, if they ever existed, are gone, or sealed where no one reads. All that remains is the mystery. Why did the water retreat? Some say the wells went dry. Others claim the water did not disappear. It moved deeper, as if withdrawing from careless hands. There are stories of a season when the city grew restless, when voices became sharp, when strangers came and spoke of taking more, faster, louder. And then, one dawn, the sluice gates were sealed. Not broken, not abandoned, sealed. Stone doors were set into the channels, fitted so precisely that even sand struggled to enter. Spiral locks were turned and hidden. The flow stopped, not with chaos, but with completion. The city did not collapse in a single day. It faded, slowly, like a fire that is allowed to die without being poked or stirred. Above, courtyards emptied, gardens lost their green, fountains fell silent. The sound of water, once the city's heartbeat, became a memory. But below the chambers remained, and there is a strange comfort in that thought. Beneath the silence, water can still exist without being seen, without being demanded, without being named. It can rest in the dark, holding the world's coolness close, sleeping with its own patience. Some believe that was the final act of devotion, to let the water go, to stop pulling at it, to stop treating it like a servant, to seal the gates and allow the earth to keep its secret. If so, then the city's disappearance was not only loss, it was surrender, a quiet recognition that some gifts cannot be owned forever. Imagine walking there now, though no one truly does. You stand on dunes under moonlight. The air is cold enough to feel ancient. The sand shifts softly around your ankles, but beneath it you sense something solid, stone, waiting. You find a half-buried rim of a well, its carvings smooth like river rock. You place your hand on it, and it is cooler than it should be, as if it remembers the darkness below. You listen. At first you hear nothing. Then, perhaps, only perhaps, you sense a faint hollowness beneath the stone. A chamber, a channel, a space that once carried water like a whispered hymn. And for a moment you understand the old belief that water is alive. Not alive like a creature with a face, but alive like a memory, like a truth that moves unseen, like a presence that chooses where it will go. The emotional ache arrives softly here, not the ache of catastrophe, but of forgetting. We have forgotten what it means to wait for water, to honor night dew, to read the wind for coolness, to accept that some things are not guaranteed. The lost city beneath the dunes is not only a buried place, it is a buried rhythm, a way of moving through time with gentleness, with gratitude, with restraint. Where memory fades, the thirst becomes louder. And yet, beneath the sand, the water does not argue. It does not explain itself. It simply rests. It is said that on certain nights, when the moon is thin and the air is very still, the desert breathes coolness from hidden shafts. A traveler might feel it pass over their skin like a sigh. They might follow it, not knowing why, until they reach a place where the sand seems to dip, as if something below is inhaling. They might kneel. They might place a palm on stone. And they might feel, deep beneath, the faintest promise of moisture. Not enough to drink, only enough to remember. The chapter ends not with discovery, but with quiet acceptance. Perhaps the city's wells were not meant to be reopened. Perhaps the water was not taken from them, it was returned to the earth, like a prayer placed back into silence. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And so the water sleeps in stone, far beneath the dunes, holding its coolness, holding its story, untouched by hurry. Above, the wind continues its slow work. It smooths the sand. It hides the markers. It keeps the surface calm. And beneath the silence, in chambers curved like closed hands, the water rests, patient, ancient, and still listening. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, or perhaps it waits for a world that remembers how to drink slowly. For now, let it sleep. Let the desert breathe. And let your own breath follow it, downward, into the cool dark, where nothing rushes, where everything simply becomes quiet.
It is said that the library was never meant to be found, not because it was hidden poorly, but because it was hidden completely, sealed not by force, but by intention. Beneath the dunes, where stone cools the air and sound forgets itself, there is a chamber with no name. No sign marks its entrance, no symbol declares its purpose. The doorway, half buried and smooth, bears no inscription, only the quiet curve of stone shaped by hands that believed knowledge did not always need a title. In forgotten corners of the earth, libraries are built to display what is known.
This one was built to protect what should remain gentle. The descent begins slowly. A passage slopes downward, the air cooling with each step, the light thinning until it becomes suggestion rather than sight. Sound fades here. Even breath seems to soften, as if the walls are listening. Then the chamber opens. It is wide and calm, carved from stone with a patience that feels almost tender. Shelves line the walls, not wooden, not ornate, but etched directly into the rock itself. They are empty now, or perhaps they were always meant to appear that way. Whispers tell us this library did not hold books in the way we imagine them. No towering stacks of scrolls, no ink meant to last forever. What it preserved was quieter, memory. The people of the city believed that some knowledge grows heavy when written down, that words fixed too firmly begin to lose their breath. So they kept records that could fade, songs spoken only once, weather patterns remembered by feel, stories shared in twilight and allowed to change. Here, knowledge was not owned, it was experienced. The central chamber holds a single stone table, worn smooth by time and touch. Above it, a circular opening in the ceiling allows moonlight to descend on certain nights. The light does not illuminate words, it illuminates dust, fine, slow-moving particles that drift like stars suspended in air. Those who entered the library did not come to read, they came to sit. It is said that elders would bring children here at night, guiding them down in silence. They would sit together beneath the opening, watching the dust glow softly in moonlight. No one spoke, no one explained. The lesson was not information, it was attention. To notice how stillness feels, to understand that forgetting is sometimes a form of care. As centuries passed, the city changed. The world beyond its walls grew louder, faster, more eager to preserve everything. Names were carved deeper, records multiplied, truth hardened into roll, and the library listened. Some believe the decision to seal it came quietly, no council, no decree, simply an understanding shared without words, that the knowledge held here, fragile, fluid, human, would not survive exposure. So the final act was not destruction, but closure. Stone blocks were fitted carefully into the entrance. No collapse, no chaos. The shelves were left empty, as they always had been. The table remained. The dust was allowed to settle. The library exhaled and slept. Emotion moves gently here, into tenderness rather than loss. There is sadness, yes, but also relief, the sense that something precious was spared from being misunderstood. Where memory fades, meaning can still remain. Beneath the sand, the chamber rests. Its walls curve inward, absorbing sound, holding quiet like water in cupped hands. Nothing echoes loudly here. Even time seems to slow. Imagine standing at the sealed doorway now. You do not feel locked out, you feel calmed, as if the burden of knowing everything has been lifted, as if you are allowed at last to not remember. The desert above shifts endlessly, but below the library remains unchanged. Dust drifts, stone cools, silence deepens. Perhaps the library never needed a name because it was never meant to be spoken of. Perhaps its purpose was fulfilled the moment it taught someone how to sit quietly with not knowing. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some knowledge survives only by remaining unnamed. The chapter ends not with revelation, but with rest. The library sleeps beneath the dunes, holding nothing, and in doing so, holding everything it was meant to preserve. Let it remain there, let the silence keep it, and let your thoughts soften, like dust settling in moonlight, as sleep draws closer.
It is said the day began like any other. The light rose gently over the horizon, pale and unhurried, brushing the stone walls of the city with a warmth that felt familiar. Shadows withdrew from courtyards. The air cooled after the long night. Birds passed overhead without ceremony. And yet, beneath the ordinary rhythm of morning, something had already changed. This was the day the gates were sealed. Not in panic, not in sorrow, but with a calm so complete it felt almost ceremonial. The city did not tremble, it did not cry out, it simply moved, slowly, deliberately, toward an ending it had already accepted. In forgotten corners of the earth, cities fall with noise, with fire, with names shouted into smoke. But this city chose another way. It chose silence. The gates stood at the edge of the world, tall, narrow, and curved inward like cupped hands. Their surfaces were carved with spirals and star-marked lines, symbols worn smooth by generations who passed through them without haste. These were not gates of defense, they were thresholds, places where travelers paused, where breath slowed, where the inside and outside learned to acknowledge one another. That morning, the gates were open just enough to let the light pass through. Streets leading toward them were quiet. No carts rolled, no footsteps hurried. Objects rested where they had been left, bowls beside fountains, tools placed neatly against walls. Nothing was abandoned in chaos. Everything was set down with care. Some believe the people had known for many nights that this moment would come, that dreams had grown heavier, that the stars had shifted in subtle ways only the patient could read. The city listened, as it always had, and when the listening was complete, the decision arrived without words. At the gates, stone met stone, hands pressed against cool surfaces, not to resist, but to feel, one last time, the shape of the threshold. The light narrowed, the sound of the outside softened, as if the world itself understood and chose not to intrude. There was no final speech, no ritual chant. The sealing was the ritual. The hinges, carved directly from stone, turned slowly, guided by gravity and intent rather than force. The doors moved inward, closing not with a crash, but with a breath. Inside the city, the air changed, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed by those who paid attention. A stillness settled, deeper than before, the kind of stillness that follows completion. Whispers tell us the gates were sealed not to keep something out, but to keep something in. Time. The city had always lived gently within it, never rushing, never demanding. But the world beyond the walls had begun to move differently, faster, louder, more certain that everything must be taken, measured, preserved. The gates were closed to protect a way of being. Emotion turns inward here, as the city itself did. The listener is invited to imagine standing on either side of those doors, not feeling loss, but relief, as if the noise of the world has been turned down, as if the pressure to continue has been lifted. Inside, life did not stop immediately. Fires were allowed to fade naturally. Water was shared carefully. People gathered not to plan, but to rest, to sit in familiar spaces and let them be enough. Outside, the desert waited. Wind arrived first, gentle and curious. It traced the outline of the gates, tested their seams, found no weakness. Sand followed, gathering slowly at the base, not as an attack, but as a covering. Days passed, then seasons. The gates remained closed, unchanged. No cracks formed, no stones shifted. The city did not resist being forgotten. It accepted it. Above, dunes rose and fell. Walls softened into curves. Paths disappeared. The city's name slipped from memory. But the gates, sealed with intention, held. Some believe that within, the city continued to exist for a time in quiet completeness, that its people did not vanish suddenly, but slowly, like embers dimming without being stirred, that their final gift to the world was absence without violence. Where memory fades, peace can sometimes remain. Imagine the gates now, long buried. You walk across dunes under a sky deepening into blue. The wind cools your skin. You do not know exactly where you are, but something feels anchored beneath your feet. Stone. Depth. A boundary drawn long ago. You pause, not because you must, but because the place asks it of you. You sense that something was finished here. Not destroyed, finished. The gates closed not because hope ended, but because it was complete. And so the chapter ends as the day did, not with finality, but with quiet. The gates sleep beneath the sand, sealed and whole. Nothing escapes, nothing enters. The city rests within its own time. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Perhaps the gates will never open again, or perhaps they never truly closed, only turned inward, like eyes at rest. For now, let them remain sealed. Let the desert keep its watch. And let your thoughts, like the city, settle gently into silence as sleep approaches.
It begins with a single mark in the sand, a shallow hollow, pressed into the earth long ago, preserved only because the ground beneath was kind enough to remember. The wind moves gently across it, careful not to erase what remains. Moonlight touches the edge of the impression, revealing its shape, human, unmistakable, and alone. It is said this was one of the last footsteps, not the last taken,
but the last remembered. Beyond it, the desert stretches outward, smooth and unbroken, offering no sign of where the path once led. And beneath that quiet surface lies a question that has never settled. Where did they go, the ones who left and never returned? In forgotten corners of the earth, cities vanish in many ways. Some burn, some crumble, some are swallowed by water. But this city thinned. It loosened its hold on itself, and its people drifted away, one path at a time. The roads that once led outward were gentle, unassuming. They did not announce departure with grandeur. They curved slowly beyond the walls, following contours of land and wind, as if reluctant to leave too quickly. These were not roads of conquest, they were roads of passage. Stone beneath them was worn smooth, not by carts or armies, but by footsteps, generations of them. Quiet steps taken at dawn and dusk, when the air was cooler and the sky more forgiving. Each step pressed memory into the ground. And then, one day, the pressure lessened. Some believe the leaving happened gradually, that families departed in small groups, carrying little more than what could be remembered. There were no convoys, no exodus marked by urgency, only paths that grew quieter, then silent. Others whisper of a final departure, a night when the city's remaining inhabitants gathered, not to say goodbye, but to acknowledge that the rhythm had changed, that the place they loved was no longer asking them to stay. The city did not resist their leaving. It is said the streets did not echo with farewell, the gates did not cry out. Even the temple remained silent, eyes closed, holding its breath. The footsteps moved outward, away from stone and memory, into open land. Some paths led toward distant settlements, others toward mountains, some perhaps toward nothing at all, and none of them came back. Emotion drifts softly here, like the wind over the dunes. There is no tragedy in the leaving, only distance, only the quiet ache of knowing that presence once filled a space that now rests empty. The desert, patient as always, began its work. Wind softened the edges of the roads. Sand gathered in shallow lines where footsteps had pressed deepest. Markers tilted. Archways collapsed inward, not in violence, but in surrender. Within a generation, the paths became suggestions rather than directions. Within a century, they became rumors. And still, beneath the silence, the ground remembered. It remembered weight. It remembered movement. It remembered the difference between standing and going. Some travelers, long after the city faded, claimed to feel something underfoot, a firmness where sand should have shifted. They spoke of places where the ground felt shaped, as though molded by countless steps moving in the same direction. They followed those sensations for a time, only to lose them again as dunes reshape themselves. The desert does not reveal everything at once. Where memory fades, the body sometimes remembers instead. There is a tenderness in imagining those final journeys. People walking without maps, guided by stars they had known since childhood, carrying songs that did not need to be written, carrying silence as a companion rather than a burden. Perhaps they never meant to return. Perhaps the city was not abandoned but completed, its final act being to release its people back into the wider world, carrying fragments of its gentleness with them. The footprint in the sand becomes symbolic here, not a sign of loss, but of movement, of choice. Even now, the desert occasionally reveals such marks, briefly before reclaiming them. A curve in the sand that feels too deliberate, a hardened impression that resists erasure just long enough to be noticed. Then the wind arrives and the mark softens. Imagine standing there under a sky heavy with stars. You look down and see nothing remarkable at first, just sand. But then you sense it, a subtle firmness, a suggestion of direction beneath your feet. You feel as though you are standing on a path that no longer wishes to be seen. You do not follow it, you simply acknowledge it. The ache deepens, not sharply, but warmly. A recognition that all places we love eventually ask something of us. Sometimes they ask us to stay. Sometimes quietly they ask us to go. The city beneath the dunes asked its people to leave gently. And they did. Their footsteps moved outward, dissolved into time, and were carried into other lives, other lands, other stories. What they took with them cannot be traced. What they left behind rests in silence. The chapter closes with the wind smoothing the sand once more. The footprint fades. The road disappears. And yet the sense of movement remains, like a breath just released. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some journeys are meant to end not in return, but in becoming part of the distance. Let the thought rest. Let the desert smooth the surface, and let your own thoughts, like those final footsteps, drift gently outward until they dissolve into quiet, and sleep finds you where the path ends.
It is said the map was finished, and yet something was missing. By candlelight, the parchment lay open on a stone table, its edges curled by time and careful hands. Rivers were traced with devotion, Mountains rose in fine lines of ink. Coastlines curved with patience and certainty. And then there was a space, a wide, deliberate emptiness. No name filled it, no symbol dared to settle there. The map simply stopped speaking. In forgotten corners of the earth, maps are made to explain the world, to tame it, to declare that everything has a place and every place can be known. But this map, like others made after it, refused to tell a certain story. The silence was intentional. Whispers tell us that once, long ago, the city appeared on maps like any other, a point between routes, a place of rest beneath the stars. But over time, its markings grew fainter, ink thinned, names shortened, until one day the space was left blank altogether. Not torn away, not scratched out in anger, simply left alone. Cartographers noticed, but did not question it aloud. They copied what they were given. They traced the known and avoided the quiet. Each new map inherited the same omission, the same breath held where words should have been. Beneath the silence, a question lingered. What kind of place asks not to be remembered? Some believe the city itself asked for this forgetting, that after the gates were sealed and the footsteps faded, the final act of preservation was to remove its name from the world's mouth. A place unspoken cannot be misused. A place unmarked cannot be claimed. The maps obeyed. Stone archives filled with charts that led everywhere except there. Measuring rods stopped short. Grids ended politely at the edge of absence. It was not ignorance, it was restraint. Where memory fades, boundaries soften. There are legends of a master cartographer who once tried to restore the city to parchment. He followed old roads, gathered fragments, listened to travelers' half-stories whispered by firelight. At last, he drew the outline, carefully, lovingly. But when he returned at dawn, the ink had bled into nothing. The lines dissolved, leaving only blank parchment behind. He did not try again. Perhaps the land itself refused to be fexed. The emotional weight here is subtle, like the pressure of unshed rain. Not fear, but respect. A sense that some truths resist containment, that to map something is to freeze it, and some places are meant to move, even in stillness. The stars above were never erased. Constellations remained precise, named and renamed across cultures and centuries. The sky could be trusted. It asked nothing in return. The ground, however, was different. The city beneath the dunes had withdrawn not only from travelers, but from certainty. It slipped sideways out of history, into something closer to myth, not because it was unreal, but because it was complete. Imagine holding one of those maps now. Your fingers trace familiar routes, your eyes follow rivers to their mouths, and then you pause over the blank space. It draws your attention not by detail, but by its absence. The longer you look, the more it feels intentional. Protective. You feel no urge to fill it. The desert above that hidden place continues to shift. Wind redraws its own maps each night. Dunes rise, collapse, reform. The land writes and erases itself endlessly, needing no ink. Below, the city rests without coordinates. Perhaps it was never meant to be found again. Perhaps it was meant to become an idea rather than a destination. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some places survive only by refusing to speak. The chapter closes with parchment rolled carefully shut. The candle burns low. The blank space remains unchallenged. Above, the stars hold their positions. Below, the desert keeps its secret. Let the map remain silent. Let the unknown stay whole. And let your thoughts drift gently into that open space where nothing is marked, nothing is demanded, and sleep arrives without needing a name.
It is said the stars never turned away. Long after the city's name softened into rumor, long after its streets were buried and its gates sealed, the stars remained, fixed, patient, watching. Night after night, they crossed the same paths they always had, tracing stories in the dark that did not require an audience. Above the desert, the sky still remembered. The chapter opens in vastness. Dunes stretch outward, pale and unmoving, beneath a dome of cold light. The air is clear, thin, almost weightless. Starlight touches the sand not to illuminate, but to acknowledge. Beneath that quiet radiance, something lies hidden, something that once looked up and listened. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always raised their eyes to the night. They measured their lives against it. They trusted it. And this city, buried now beneath the dunes, was among those that understood the sky not as decoration, but as companion. Its buildings were aligned carefully, not for power, but for orientation. Streets followed cardinal directions. Courtyards opened toward rising constellations. And at the heart of the city stood a place of watching, a simple observatory of stone and silence. It was not tall. It did not dominate the skyline. It rested within it. Circular in form, its walls curved gently inward, guiding the eye upward. At night, the roof dissolved into darkness, and the stars poured in. The people gathered there did not speak loudly. They did not ask the heavens for favors. They waited. They believed the stars were older than any city, wiser than any ruler, that they watched not to judge, but to witness, to hold memory when the ground could not. Stone floors were etched with constellations, patterns repeated precisely, generation after generation. Children learned them by walking barefoot along their lines. Elders traced them with careful fingers, feeling time beneath their skin. The city did not track hours. It tracked cycles. When certain stars returned to familiar positions, planting began. When others dipped low, rest followed. Even endings were written in the sky, not as warnings, but as gentle confirmations. So when the city began to fade, the stars did not intervene. They watched. There was no single moment of collapse, no night when the sky burned brighter in alarm. The change came gradually, like twilight. Fires burned lower, songs grew fewer. The observatory doors were left open, then left alone. One by one, the people stopped gathering beneath the stars. Some believed the final watchers came alone, an elder perhaps, or a child, someone who remembered the old alignments and came one last time to look up, to confirm what they already knew, that the city's time had folded inward. The stars continued their paths, indifferent yet intimate. They marked the passing of years as the sand rose slowly around the stone. They watched walls soften. They watched roofs collapse gently, not in violence, but in fatigue. They watched the city sink, not suddenly, but with dignity. Emotion here becomes expansive, then tender. The listener senses a truth that feels both humbling and comforting, that nothing is truly lost to the sky, that even when names vanish and places are buried, something remembers. Where memory fades on earth, the heavens continue. Above the dunes, constellations remain unchanged. The same stars that once guided footsteps now guide nothing at all, and yet their purpose is not diminished. They shine whether they are seen or not. Imagine standing there now. The desert is cool beneath your feet. The night air carries no scent of smoke or water, only openness. You look up, and the stars feel close, as if leaning in. You sense that beneath you, far below the sand, stone still aligns itself to the sky. The city is no longer visible, but it has not drifted out of place. It remains oriented. Some believe that was the final wisdom of the city, to anchor itself not in permanence, but in relationship. To accept that buildings fall, names disappear, but alignment can remain. The stars watched the city sink, and in doing so, they kept its shape, not in stone, but in pattern. No conquest erased it, no disaster claimed it. It simply stepped back from the world, allowing the larger order to hold it. The ache here is gentle, a reminder that we too will one day become unseen, that our lives, so carefully built, will soften and blend into time. And yet, above us, the same stars will shine. They will not mourn, they will remember. Clouds pass slowly now, dimming the light. The constellations blur, then return. The desert breathes. The city beneath the dunes does not stir. It has no need to. Its story is no longer written in walls or roads. It is written in angles, in orientation, in the quiet fact that once here, humans listened carefully to the night. Perhaps that is enough. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some places survive not by standing, but by sinking gently into the care of the sky. The chapter closes with the stars continuing their motion, unbroken and serene. The desert breathes. The city beneath the dunes does not stir. It has no need to.
Its story is no longer written in walls or roads. It is written in angles, in orientation, and the quiet fact that once here, humans listened carefully to the night. Perhaps that is enough. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some places survive not by standing, but by sinking gently into the care of the sky. The chapter closes with the stars continuing their motion, unbroken and serene. The desert breathes. The city rests unseen, perfectly aligned, held in a pattern older than memory. Let the thought widen, let the sky carry it. And as your eyes grow heavy, allow yourself to drift, knowing that even when all else fades, something above is always watching, quietly keeping time.
It is said that nothing truly disappears. Not cities, not voices, not even breath. The desert at night appears empty, smooth as a held thought. Dunes stretch outward in slow curves, their edges softened by wind that has learned patience over countless ages. Moonlight rests lightly on the sand, never staying long in one place. And yet, beneath this quiet surface, something endures. Something still breathes. Not with lungs or flame or motion, but with memory. This chapter begins not with what can be seen, but what can be felt. A subtle coolness rising from the ground just before dawn. A faint shift beneath your feet that does not belong to the wind. The suggestion that the earth itself inhales and exhales in rhythms too deep to hear. Beneath the silence, the city remains. Its walls no longer rise. Its streets no longer catch the moon. Its gates no longer open or close. And yet, it has not vanished. It has settled, folded inward, like a sleeper drawing breath quietly so not to disturb the night. In forgotten corners of the earth, there are places that resist being called ruins. They are not broken. They are resting. The city beneath the dunes is one of them. Stone chambers still hold their shape below the sand. Corridors curve gently. Not collapsed, but filled. Embraced by earth rather than crushed by it. Air pockets remain. Cavities where sound once lived and now rests. The desert did not rush in violently. It arrived slowly, grain by grain, allowing the city time to close itself. Some believe that was the final ritual, that after the gates were sealed, after the water was returned to the earth, after the library slept and the footsteps faded, the city prepared itself for stillness. Not death. Stillness. They believed breath was sacred. Not only the breath of people, but the breath of places. That buildings, like bodies, require rest. That silence is not the absence of life, but a different form of it. And so the city learned to breathe beneath the sand. There are stories, always whispered, never written, of travelers who camped in the dunes and woke before dawn with the feeling of being watched. Not by eyes, but by awareness. They spoke of the ground feeling warm beneath their palms, then cool again, as if responding. Others told of hearing nothing at all, yet feeling comforted, as if something steady and ancient lay close by, holding the night together. Emotion gathers softly here, not as fear, but as reassurance. The sense that something old and complete still exists nearby, even if unseen. That the world holds more than what we can touch. Where memory fades, presence can remain. The city does not ask to be uncovered. It does not whisper instructions or promises. It does not long for return. Its breathing is enough. Its existence no longer depends on being known. Perhaps that is its final wisdom. Above the dunes, the wind continues its gentle work. It smooths edges. It erases sharpness. It keeps the surface calm. Each night, it redraws the desert slightly differently, never revealing too much. Below, the city listens. Stone remembers pressure. It remembers weight. It remembers the pause before a door closes, and the quiet after. Beneath layers of sand, those memories do not fade, they slow. Imagine lying there now, on the cool desert floor. The sky stretches wide above you. The moon drifts behind thin clouds. Stars blur slightly,
as if seen through water. You place your hand on the sand and feel not movement, but depth. A layered stillness that feels deliberate, held. You breathe in. The air is cool, clean, ancient. And for a moment it feels as though the ground beneath you responds, not shifting, not stirring, but matching your rhythm. Breath for breath. As if the city below remembers what it was like to share air with the living. The ache that comes now is gentle and whole. A realization that not all endings are empty. That some places finish their stories and continue existing in a quieter register. We often search for what was lost, believing that uncovering it will bring understanding. But some truths do not want to be exposed. They want to be trusted. The city beneath the dunes trusts the silence. It trusts the sand to keep its shape intact. It trusts the stars to remember its alignment. It trusts time to carry its meaning without explanation. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to remain close, just beneath the surface of the world, breathing softly, reminding the earth how to be still. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some places teach us not by speaking, but by resting. The chapter closes with no revelation, no opening door, no sudden light. Only the desert, calm and complete. The wind settles. The night deepens. Beneath it all, the city continues to breathe. Not loudly, not urgently. Just enough to remind the world that silence too is alive. Let that thought rest with you. Let the breath slow. Let the sand hold what it has chosen to keep. And as sleep arrives, gentle and unannounced, remember this. Nothing that mattered was ever truly lost. Some things simply learned how to be quiet.